back to the program. In an unprecedented ruling, a British judge has recognized an Islamic faith marriage as being legal under UK law. The case was brought by a Muslim woman who wanted to divorce her estranged husband. The couple were married at a traditional Muslim wedding ceremony, also known as a nikah, 20 years ago, but it was regarded as a religious ceremony and therefore not a civil marriage under UK law. The husband has blocked divorce proceedings invoking Sharia law, under which a union can only be dissolved by a council of Muslim leaders, but such councils have no legal jurisdiction in the UK. Now, to break this down further, we're joined live by political commentator David Vance and Muslim rights campaigner Salman Butt. Thank you both for joining us on the program. Now, David, if we could go ahead and start with you, how significant do you think this ruling is in terms of how Britain regards religious weddings and the marriage thereafter?
Yeah, I think, Jacqueline, it is quite a significant ruling because it is essentially the first time that the British courts or legal system has essentially recognised a parallel legal system, namely Sharia law. Now, Sharia law, of course, you cannot have multiple forms of law. You know, we are all equal under the one law. But it seems that for some reason this court has determined that it will recognise Sharia and essentially institutionalise one aspect of it, in this case marriage, and somehow say that that's legitimate under British law. I think it's very bad law in the sense that it does set a precedent without perhaps establishing what the boundaries around that should be. So I view this as troubling, misguided, and potentially very disturbing for the future, Jacqueline.
Salman, what do you make of those comments? Do you consider this as the UK recognising Sharia law in this case?
Well, I happen to have read the judgment, and literally on page 1, the judge says this has got nothing to do with recognising Sharia or anything. This appears to be just something that some people are getting excited about. The judge was talking about recognising it as a void marriage under English common law, which is not exactly the same as Sharia, although this might be a bit similar. So, yes, he emphatically made that point that this is not about recognising a Sharia law, it's about recognising and implementing what is seen as a marriage or a void marriage under English common law, not Sharia law. Although the two are very different.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's actually not the case. In this instance, and I can understand, Salman, why the judge has perhaps taken this decision, given the marital debate between this couple. I guess the judge was trying to provide the estranged wife under Islamic law, Sharia law with the same rights that someone married under British law would have. But of course, this couple who were married under Sharia chose not to then have that marriage also in a British civil court. So what the judge is essentially doing, he is allowing this Muslim couple the opportunity to go round the British civil court system and yet enjoy the same benefits. And that seems to me somewhat prejudicial, discriminating against other people, and fundamentally unfair, even if the judge thinks it was for the right reason. I suggest it's wrong.
Again, you appear not to have actually read the judgment you're talking about. He's talking about what is considered marriage or void marriage under English common law, which has been here for centuries before Muslims even came here. It's got nothing to do with Sharia.
But unfortunately, the case, Salman, was brought by Muslims to the court. So you're trying to suggest that somehow this has nothing to do with Sharia. In actual fact, it's got everything to do with Sharia. It couldn't be more clear. And you're being disingenuous by suggesting it's somehow completely divorced from Islam. It's everything to do with Sharia law as it's understood in this United Kingdom. And we cannot have, I'm sure you'd agree with me, there is no place for parallel legal systems within the UK. Can we agree on that?
You appear again to be ignoring the actual words of the judgment. The judge is saying this has nothing to do with Sharia. This is something called English common law, which has been here for hundreds of years. It's not the same as English statute law. You're right in that case. We have statute law, which is determined by parliamentarians, and we have the English common law. He's saying under English common law, people who are living together, who appear to be presenting themselves as a married couple, whether it's because they're Muslims or Jews or Sikhs or Hindus or whatever the case. He's talking about the English common law, which has been here for hundreds of years. If you want to call that a parallel legal system, that there's a statute law and a common law, fair enough, that's your prerogative. But bringing Islam into this, Sharia into this, literally has no sense to it whatsoever.
Well, actually, you didn't actually answer my question. I note, did you believe or not there should be parallel legal systems within this United Kingdom? You didn't answer that question. But back on the substance of the point, then would you suggest, from what you're saying, that this judgment now means that any couple living together on the basis of this decision now can claim the full rights of a divorced couple who were married under British civil law? Because if so, that's really big news. That should be making every headline, and for some reason it's not. So are you saying that a judge has now made a decision that facilitates any couple? Sorry, I've read. I mean, I can read. I assure you, I'm well capable of reading. And in this scenario, what I'm reading is a judge has made an exception for a couple coming from a Sharia law environment. And that is what's making the headlines.
Okay, gentlemen, if I could go ahead and jump in. Salman, I wanted to ask you, how will Muslim leaders take this decision coming down from a UK court? Does this put it at odds with what Sharia law is saying, given that there was no council, making this decision? Well,
to be fair, no, because those people who I have talked to, they say this is nothing new, out of the ordinary. If we were having this conversation a few hundred years ago, then yes, the distinction between Sharia and whatever happens to be English law would have been great. But over the years, over the centuries, English law has improved to the level where it's very, very similar to the general aims and objectives of Sharia anyway. So a marriage under English common law is very similar to a marriage under Sharia law anyway, in terms of, before, maybe a few hundred years ago, for example, the woman wouldn't even be accepted under English law as a human being, or have rights to divorce and so on and so forth. But now we're talking about something which is very similar. It's not exactly the same, but the Sharia has certain, guidelines, certain rights and responsibilities for a husband and wife, or people who are, showing the world that they are husband and wife. And likewise, English common law does as well. So what the judge is actually doing is judging based on the common law. And if somebody actually reads the judgment, like apparently my interlocutor hasn't, sadly, they'll realize it's got nothing to do with Sharia. It would be exactly the same if they were just, Jedis or something conducting some kind of Jedi marriage ceremony. Because the judge is looking at the issue according to English common law.
And David, one of the points that the judge was making was that he didn't feel like he could determine this as a non-marriage, because these two people had lived together for 20 years. They were treated as a married couple. They had 4 children together. And that's why he determined that it was a void marriage. What do you make of that point?
Well, let me respond to that in a second, but just to go back to what's been said, for someone to suggest that Sharia law in its full manifestation has any comparability to British law is ludicrous. We only have to look around the world to see some of the barbarism associated with Sharia law to understand how incompatible parts of it is with, as for example, the United Kingdom. That's point number one. Point number two, again, as regards what the judge has said, I believe this judge has set a precedent which does carry consequences. Those consequences seem to elevate Islam to a particular prominence which it doesn't deserve above any other faith. And those married under Islam have always had the opportunity, Jacqueline, to get the rights which this judge has now availed them by simply having a civil ceremony. That's open to all people. We have to ask the question, how come, in this case, Muslims are now being allowed to skip that opportunity? Why aren't imams telling them that, look, if you want to get married under Sharia law, that's one thing, but bear in mind that it does not provide you with legal status under British law, and now this judge has given them a backstop. I think that's wrong.
Well, to be fair, the woman in this case, she was arguing that she did ask for this civil ceremony and that her husband refused to go forward with it, that her father had also asked for it, and it just was not an option for her, just the same as she asked for a divorce, and he would not give it to her. So, Salman, if we can go to you again, what do you think this means for other women who are in unhappy marriages, possibly, that they might also try and take this route?
Well, I don't mean to be sticking to the tedious issue of the actual judgment, but I think it means little to absolutely nothing, because the rights that women and indeed men have in this scenario are the exact same rights that they would have under the English common law, and they've had for decades, if not centuries. So when you look at things, for example, the division of assets and so forth, if there's an asset which is truly shared, like the marital home or a car or something they bought together, then regardless of if they're married or not, even under the English common law, let alone Sharia, obviously, they have an entitlement to, they both have an entitlement to that thing. When it comes to getting out of a marriage or exiting a marriage, it's very similar likewise in, under the English common law. So women who do want to annul a civil marriage, they can go to a civil court. Women who wish to annul their Islamic contract or any other contract, they can go to the relevant party to do that.
Except it's not really like that at all, Jacqueline. And as I'm familiar with Muslim women who have sought to get divorce, and as you say in this case, the lady had to go through enormous hurdles to try and get to the position that she's wanted. So I do sympathise with the woman in that regard. But no, please let me finish, if I may. So I do have huge sympathies. And in actual fact, this brings it back to the core issue for me, which is this. Why is Sharia law tolerated in any regard in this United Kingdom? It should be one law for all people, and that's quite simply how, for example, it operates in those countries that only operate Sharia law. So the UK, I'm afraid people can't pick and choose. It's either British law or Sharia law. It can't be both. And this judgment mixes and matches regardless of what you've just been told, and that is a problem, and I fear for the consequences down the line.
You're right, this woman has been through a lot to try and obtain a divorce, but that's a civil divorce in the civil English Family High Court. Getting a Sharia divorce cost her literally 2% of the cost and an afternoon in front of a Sharia council advisor. It's far, far, far easier. This is not about them annulling a Sharia marriage. This is about them annulling what she argued was a civil marriage, and for which she had to go to the civil courts. As for your ludicrous point about one law, we're already subjected to the same law, my friend. If you don't,
David, if you could go ahead and let him finish, and then you can respond. Go ahead, Salman.
If you don't like the fact that, according to our existing law in the UK, some people have the freedom to choose this type of contract or that type of contract, whether it's marriage or buying a house or even hiring a car or whatever, if you don't like the fact that people have the choices and the freedom to do different things under the existing law, you can campaign for the law to be changed. But it's not Muslims here that are trying to call for something exceptional. It's you, my friend.
Well, if I can respond, Jacqueline, the point is that, contrary to what you've just said, this is entirely a Muslim-related issue. Sharia law is entirely related to Islam. And in this instance, what we've seen is one further advance in something which many British people will find objectionable, namely having a second tier of law in this United Kingdom recognised. Whether you like it or not, Sharia law should have no place in the United Kingdom. I want to see everyone equal under the law. My friend, if you don't feel comfortable with that, then perhaps that's the question you have to answer, certainly not me.
I'm happy with the existing law as it is. We're already equal under the law. Again, you're the one who appears to have an issue with that. If you want to talk about Sharia, I'd love to talk about Sharia. I'd like to talk about Sharia with anyone, yourself or any other functionally illiterate person with regards to the Sharia. But this is not about Sharia. This is not about some kind of secondary parallel law, as some people are trying to get excited about. This is about a judge interpreting English law, English common law, and English statute law, and giving a ruling according to English law, not Sharia.
By making an exception. By making an exception. That's the point that you're continually avoiding. In this instance, the judge
on page one. All you had to read
Please don't
was the first
interrupt me.
page.
The judge has made a specific exception in this case for a Muslim couple. You can't avoid that. I'm sorry, that's just the fact of the matter. And I'm simply saying I do not believe that anyone is above the law. I think we should all be treated equally. And in this case, for whatever reason, the judge has set a precedent. And as I'm sure you understand, precedents can lead to all kinds of bad situations. And in this case, what we're seeing is a parallel law being legitimised in the UK. I repeat, Sharia courts have no place in the United Kingdom.
Literally, all you had to read was the first page of the judgment to show the judge is saying, almost verbatim, I'm saying, this has nothing to do with recognising Sharia. I don't know where you're getting these fairy tales from, but there's nothing to do with the actual matter at hand. I'd love to talk about Sharia, but this is about English law. An English law judge in the Family High Court, Family Division, actually ruling according to what English common law says and statute law says. I'm not saying I don't like it. I'm not bothered with this ruling. You clearly appear to be bothered, and maybe you should take it up with the judge.
But I think anyone familiar with Sharia law might be very bothered about it, because some of us then wonder what might the next exceptionality for Sharia law proponents be. Shall we expect blasphemy laws to become legitimised, and will you then argue that's nothing to do with Islam either? I'm afraid this is everything to do with Islam, and you don't want to accept that simple fact. What you're doing is you're trying to suggest that I'm the fantasist here. I repeat, I'm sure you can read the headlines and the content of how the media has reported this. So either the media is all wrong, and you are right.
Gentlemen, I'm afraid that we are out of time at this point. Salman Butt, Muslim rights campaigner, David Vance, political commentator, thank you both for joining us on the program tonight.
Thank you.
That's our wrap-up of the day's headline for now.